Welcome to H3 Live. You are here with Trish and Steve. Hey, Steve Bose.
Hey, Trish. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. We have guests today, Trish. I see other boxes with people in them. This is exciting.
Isn't it exciting? Well, I want to welcome our guest today. We are going to have a really interesting discussion today on total workforce management and just the changes that are coming in that topic. So we have Klaus Grunwald and Ryan Baker. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Yes. Well, listen, why don't we take a minute? I think people probably see Steve and I all the time, so we don't need to kind of go into our history. But Klaus, why don't you just take a second and introduce yourself, tell everyone a little bit about you.
Yeah, thank you. And hi there. My name is Klaus Grunewald, working out of Germany for a company called SAP. So I'm sitting right now at the headquarters in beautiful Waldorf. Probably doesn't say much to you. It's close to Heidelberg, which probably is also known or more known. I'm running the intelligence, spend, and business network ecosystem for SAP. So anything which is spend categories, where of course talent is one of them, is falling under my leadership. And yeah, we are running that worldwide, having regional teams, but of course we have a global team doing the go-to-market, working with the ecosystem on solutions, selling and servicing, as well as then also with wonderful partners like Ryan from Monument.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Klaus. Appreciate it. So Ryan Baker, president of Monument Consulting. I am coming to you today from Washington, D.C. I mentioned just a minute ago, I've got the Washington Monument right out here outside the window here, but I'm usually in Richmond, Virginia, where Monument Consulting is headquartered. I've been with Monument now just 8 years, I believe. So, but been in the kind of human capital management, staffing arena, consulting arena for 20 years now. So it's been a good ride. I've done all kinds of different things, managed whether it be staffing regions, field offices. Currently at Monument, I've been in sales. I've ran our program management organization in the past, and now run the company as of January of 2019. So 4 years about. So all things Monument, you can ask me any question regarding the industry. I know a lot about a little. So there you go.
That's the perfect kind of guest, Ryan. Well, listen, thank you both for joining us. We wanted to bring you on because it's a topic that Steve and I, obviously it's close to us just because having been in the work world for a long time, but we wanted to add some other flavors to the perspective as it's sort of growing and changing and morphing lately. And so, Klaus, why don't we start with you? In the past, we've talked about traditional workforce planning, and it's really sort of morphing into total workforce management. So I'd love you to just give your perspective on maybe what that means and what are some of the differences between that more traditional approach that organizations might be taking right now.
Yeah, I mean, working for a software vendor where we have, of course, solutions for total workforce management in the area of HR, and then a special solution in the area of field class spend management, which we offer. There's certainly the definition from a software maker and from a service provider to the market, which is you have an HR system, human resources, talent management system, learning, everything which is needed to manage an internal or a non-flex workspace or workforce, so to say, where I'm one of them. So I have a standard contract in the company I'm working for. And of course, there's things in the back which have to be done in order to administrate, to operate, that I have a good work or a good life as a worker in my company. But there's also a flex workspace where people, and that goes more and more and more. I heard numbers like in the US, I think it's almost a third of the workforce is already in a flex workspace, which is more and more demanded by especially a younger generation, especially in market units, and I can speak for Germany, where capacity, where skills, where labor in certain industries and areas is super short. So that's then more like how to find these people with the right skills, which I need for that particular job to do, as well as also from an efficiency point of view, what is the best onboarding, the best offboarding, so that HR can work efficiently. So it's the combination between what purchasing does in finding, doing the contracts, getting the people on board, as well as then also all the invoices are being done, the operational part, but the more strategic part, finding the right talent in the market where you are at, which of course is not just locally anymore. It's more and more also in a global perspective, because people in the digital work or digital area, we can work from everywhere. We can work. I mean, I'm now talking to you out of Germany, while in the US, of course, it's just the day is just starting. So these are certainly things in HR management, as well as also the purchasing department, have to consider, especially because the strategies of companies are changing, and HR was not always part of that. HR was seen as function. But if strategies, if operational business is changing, if maybe there's even, we all talk about changing in supply chains, guess what that does for logistic companies, or for companies which are affected now by geopolitical events. We have lots of those geopolitical events, unfortunately, out there already, or at the moment. So this is where HR is not just acting or reacting. They have to act. They have to basically be in the driver's seat. And that's not often the case. And we believe at SAP that we can help there from an efficiency point of view, and connecting HR with procurement and the overall company strategy. Because if you're in the large enterprise, then it comes the next effect, which is compliance and governance. So you also have to do that with a plan, and you have to be transparent on that. This is total workforce management for us, which comes then, and we will probably have a conversation later on, with topics also on AI. Because the workforce is changing, and therefore also the requirements of the workforce are changing. HR should not just sit there and wait. HR should be proactively doing something about those changing requirements. And we believe at SAP, software can help. It is not the problem solver for everything, but software there can help, and intelligence can help, which we do with our systems. And then services like Ryan and Monument are offering them.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that perspective. I just wanted to say real quick, Steve, because I know you're jumping in as well, but having been an HR leader for almost 2 decades, prior to doing this job, it was something where we were actually, at least in the United States, told that the procurement and HR needed to be separate. So we were trained not to sort of work together. And so I love how you sort of kind of framed that, and not only the how you can work together with procurement more closely, but the why of it. And again, that's sort of retraining a lot of HR professionals' brains, because we were just told that was what we were not supposed to do. So I appreciate that. Steve, what do you think?
I wanted to bring in Ryan here. I thought Klaus did a great job of kind of setting up the topic and setting up sort of the challenges that organizations are facing. Ryan, I'll throw it to you. You're working with lots of clients. You're at a client site today, you mentioned. What are some of the challenges your clients are finding with getting the right people with the right skills at the right time? And then, dovetail to that, what are some of the things that Monument does specifically to help clients meet those challenges?
Right. Yeah. Well, first and foremost, Trish, I think your comment is really interesting around HR and procurement, not talking in the back. And I totally experienced that myself, from an outside perspective when I'm trying to work with entities, right? Different entities. But I do see that changing a little bit, to your point. So there is that shift happening in the marketplace. And in fact, I would take it even a step further. And it's really relevant to this conversation when you think about total workforce, total talent management. Like, you really do need multiple stakeholders involved if you're going to make that successful, right? So I know Klaus touched on it from a technology perspective, but if you're going to make that successful, you've got to have, procurement, you've got to have HR, I know finance is part of procurement, but there's different parts of finance. You've got to have business unit leaders, VPs, CTOs, COOs, involved to make it successful. Because if you don't, no one's ever going to adopt a total workforce management strategy, really. They'll talk about it all day long, but then you can't get everybody aligned because they're all doing something different. They've all got competing priorities. But anyhow, I know you were talking a little bit about the landscape there, Steve.
Yeah.
I mean, it's tough out there, right? Klaus kind of touched on a little bit in Germany, but we have the same issues here in the US where clients, especially I would say high tech, even though there's been some turnover recently with the Apples of the world, Amazon, different bigger tech companies, you see the layoffs. There's still such a need for so many different roles, whether it's cloud computing, whether it's security roles. I mean, there is definitely a need in those spaces, and technology and service providers like Monument are needed to help close that gap. So, and there's a lot of different technology partners that we work with to help enable that as well. Whether it's rate analytics, supply and demand tools that exist. Hey, I know this is really fun, right? We know the pandemic opened up where people can sit.
Yep.
I think in the past, maybe, I had to have somebody in Des Moines, Iowa. Well, now you can have someone in 4 or 5 different locations, or maybe they don't care at all. They could be anywhere in the States. They could be anywhere in the globe, just depending, right, on the client and how open they are to that. But when you have that ability, you can close some of that gap. But now it's been 3 years, right? And we still have gaps. So, solving those problems is definitely a challenge. And I think for every single client you work with, it's different. So I don't think there's a one size fits all answer, but there's definitely different strategies. And it could be, your RPO strategies. It could be contingent workforce programs. It's how you utilize service providers through services procurement or SOW. It's how you use traditional staff aug suppliers. Now you've got, digital platforms that exist. You've got AI that was mentioned that is working its way into the industry. Direct sourcing is a huge topic. So there's all these different creative sourcing methods that clients can use. And, Monument, our job is to really be, make sure the symphony is all singing, right? Like we're there to make sense of it all. And we partner with different suppliers, different technologies, different VMSs, different HRS tools, all those different things to make it work and close those gaps. I don't know if I answered your question.
No,
I was all over the place.
You did, Ryan. Thank you.
You did. And I think it's interesting because as you're kind of tying it together in terms of the way that you need to think about sort of that relationship more holistically from a business perspective. I loved how you talk about all the business stakeholders. Again, we've sort of said these things for a while, but we weren't really having a reason to do them, right? It was all more of a theory. And I do feel like maybe it's the pandemic, maybe it's just other technologies have finally brought us to this point. But it does feel like that shift is happening in a real way in organizations. Klaus, I want to ask you a little bit too on this in terms of bringing both procurement and human resources or other business stakeholders together. Obviously, one of the ways that human resources has always approached maybe acquiring talent from a workforce perspective, and maybe now also how procurement does it as well, it's very similar, is around the brand. Can you talk a little bit about, both at SAP or with your clients, kind of how does brand strategy really play into that connection between the business units as they go to war for this talent in a whole new way?
Yeah, that's a good one. First, there is the generation itself. When I'm looking at my father, baby boomer generation, very loyal to a company, 42 years with one company, never changed. Also a typical German thing, of course. But we see that with the baby boomer generation. And always, there was no flex workspace at the time, or flex work. It was basically you signed up for a company, you worked, you had a responsibility, you did your career. When I'm looking on the other hand to my daughter, which is Generation Z, she first of all works from everywhere in the world. So she just finished school, does now studies. She works from everywhere in the world because she can work, Ryan mentioned that, via platforms. So you can basically get a job, either you write as a journalist or you can work from everywhere in the world, number one. Second, she tells me she will never sign up for a standard job. She wants to have that flexibility because she can. And so when I'm having interviews now, even to get internals into my company or into our company here at SAP, that's one of the first questions, how flexible we are, which of course also reflects in the branding, which my company SAP is offering. So do we offer a flex workspace? Do we offer to say, no, you don't have to work from 8 till 5 every day, which was absolutely normal for my father, but which is not normal, or it's requested actually not to be normal for a Generation Z or a Generation Y, which probably I'm belonging to. So that flexibility is number one, which has a huge influence on the brand. Number two is, how efficient are we? Is it a pain in the neck to do onboarding, offboarding, learning? So how good are we as an organization to get either internal or external workforce in the job as quickly as possible? Which sounds easy, it's a hell of a job. And how efficient are we? Especially because when you look at so many, in a large organization like SAP, we have 104,000 employees worldwide. You have a lot of onboarding and offboarding, and also you have a lot of flex work, meaning external workforce. That is not so easy to say you are very efficient. Their software, of course, where I believe our services and cloud solutions, as well as then what Ryan and our MSPs are doing, can help in order to make companies, organizations very efficient. And the next thing is, are we really following the strategy I can tell for us at SAP, that we say that procurement, you said that, as well as also HR functions and other functions as well at SAP are integrated. Are we working as one, or the left hand does not know what the right hand does? So I think this has a huge influence on how the brand of a company is basically recognized by other companies, as well as also by potential talent. Do I want to work for that company because it's easy to work, or is it a pain in the neck and I better take my hands off?
Yeah, great answer.
Trish, I've got one more, and this one is for Ryan, because I'm thinking, when you mentioned all the different sources of talent, right, that are out there, the sources of talent seem to be multiplying. As Klaus talked about, people can work right from anywhere in the world, right? You're potentially tapping into talent sources at a global level, which maybe you never did in the past. What are some of the ways that you recommend or you help with clients to sort of keep that all manageable, and not just manageable, but also understandable and reportable? Because I'm thinking of organizations that have told me in the past, hey, we don't even know what our total headcount is around the world of full-time FTE employees. Now we're layering in all these different sources of talent, right, from these different platforms or different providers. And organizations still need to answer those really important questions about what's our cost of services, what's our cost of labor, how much is this line of business profitable or not? What are some of the ways you guys advise clients and work with clients to help them make an understandable, manageable solution from all these sources of talent?
Yes, Steve, it's a great question. And I would say it is a pillar of Monument services and our competitors that exist. And it absolutely needs technology. So SAP Fieldglass is a phenomenal partner in this space. Obviously, they have competitors that we also work with. But at the end of the day, analytics are king right now, right? I would say that's one of the most important things and one of the most sought after items our clients are looking for, whether it's in the sales process or evolution of the program, right? So you hit on a few things there, but the VMS itself, which again, Klaus and SAP help provide, it does a lot of the internal reporting. They've got some amazing native capabilities. Monument takes those native capabilities and expands upon those. So we'll do customized reporting for our clients. So to your point, hey, I want to know what our headcount looks like. I want to see trending data month over month, year over year, quarter over quarter, however you want to see that. You want to look at different, again, I call them creative sourcing methods, but you have your traditional staff aug suppliers, you have your services procurement suppliers, staffing type firms, consulting firms. You have your platforms, your different platforms. You have DE&I, so diversity-based suppliers. We can break it down any way you want. I mean, we can go all over the place with the different analytics we can provide. So you could have your total view, and then you could break it down in just multiple different categories, right? You could go business unit and then break it down by multiple different categories, right? So gig platforms that exist out there. One of our clients for their marketing department, they rely heavily on gig platforms, right? So that's a big area of, I guess they're thriving in that area using those gig providers, not your traditional staffing providers. Because we're talking about, I need somebody for 8 hours. I need somebody for 12 hours here. Food services clients, we're thriving in that space too. That's really unique. Hey, I had a dishwasher call out last night, but I need them here tomorrow. I need 2 people here tomorrow. So those gig platforms are helpful there. And then your traditional staffing suppliers, thrive in areas you may expect, IT, professional, accounting, But we can report on all of it. But anything you can imagine, we can report on basically. And a lot of that starts in the technology. Yeah. We bring it into our data warehouse, and then we disseminate that information in an appropriate way to our clients to help them make smart business decisions.
Awesome. Thank you, Ryan, for that kind of overview, because I'm thinking like, yeah, it's great to be able to tap into talent all around the world from all kinds of providers, all kinds of apps, all kinds of platforms. But if at the end of the day, if you can't understand what you've done and how the business is actually doing, right, with all this talent, then I'm not sure it's a winning, long-term strategy. Yeah.
Yeah. If you can't report on it, then you can't measure it. Right.
Yeah.
And if you're not measuring it, then how do you know if it's working? So I think that's a neat call out to say, hey, let's measure certain pockets and see what's really working, because a lot of them are like, hey, these grand ideas, but does it really work?
Yeah.
So, or are you really saving time? Are you really saving money?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the other thing too, Ryan, with that is that, when I think back to being a practitioner, it was all about big data, and what you're saying, what Klaus has kind of touched on, and when just the market and the industry are changing, it's more about that really specific targeted data is far more effective, right? It's not just about having a lot of data, but it's being able to, like you mentioned, pockets of data. I love that because it's really, what are the pockets of data that are important in that moment or to that business or to that business unit that they need to know. They don't necessarily need to know every single thing, right, all at once, right? So I love that you kind of called out those pockets of data.
Trish, you mentioned a good thing, which is big data, and of course then machine learning, AI. That is one thing, and there's certainly something which also SAP is looking into. How can we make use out of big data and learn and basically take the right things in front of the HR or the procurement department? But there's a second aspect of AI, which I would like to get your perspective here. We see that artificial intelligence, machine learning, takes or can take jobs which are routine work. I'm thinking here of banks, finance departments, wherever you have mental driven routine work to be done. Not creativity work, not necessarily where you need lots of intelligence, but this is what a machine can already do. How does that change the workforce of the future? We see dramatic changes these days all over the place, but because it changes the requirements for somebody who's searching for a job. Because the machine can take over a lot of jobs which do routines, which I think is a good thing for humanity, not necessarily for the individual. But this is where I see a trend currently going into the workspace, and for all of us, because it's changing requirements.
Yeah, it's a great thing to think about, Klaus, because for me, we'll use the banking example. When I was in college, I was a bank teller, right? So I was doing many of those very routine tasks. It is scary to think that the things you do in your job, whatever those are, can be taken away and replaced by a machine. But I will tell you too, when you're working that type of job, it's not very rewarding in terms of feeling like you're making a difference, being connected to sort of an end product or an end service, right? It is so routine. So thinking back to my brain as being a bank teller, it would have been very helpful to have much of that job automated, so that, I don't know if you all go to the banks very often. I don't go to banks very often, but I'll give you an example. I went the other day to do a wire. The teller could not stop doing the routine tasks because she had so many of those to do. She couldn't help me do a wire. I had to go to a whole different person in a different department, right? So I'm thinking like, yes, if you had technology that would enable through AI, through machine learning, some of those tasks to be taken care of, it would free you up to do the more meaningful, complex tasks that might actually keep that employee more connected to their job, right? Because they're not doing that just every day. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, RPA has been a big focus for us at Monument in the last 2 years, right? And we rolled out a few different robots last year. We like to call them the robots, and it didn't reduce our workforce at all. I mean, in fact, we continue to add people, but we're just doing more meaningful work. So to your point, Trish, like our people didn't want to do that work. They didn't. It's boring, quite honestly, and it's not fulfilling. So now the work's getting done by a machine, which has less mistakes, and we can repurpose that individual, give them the training to do something much more meaningful, and it impacts the client.
Yeah, I think you just have to convince the worker that they're still needed, right? It's just that you feel if a part of your job goes away, especially I'm Gen X, you knew if things from your job were being taken away, there was either, an acquisition coming or something, right? Something negative was happening. So as long as we can sort of teach people going forward that no, it doesn't mean your job is being taken away. It's your now a more skill-based function instead of a role-based function, right? So you can do something different.
Yeah.
Steve, I don't know. Do you want to wrap us up? I know
Yeah,
we're
great stuff. No, just I think this
having a
was
great
really
discussion.
fascinating to me, the AI and the ML and the RPA stuff Ryan mentioned is just, it's yet another source of quote unquote talent, right? It's just another source of resources that organizations can tap into, not so much to replace jobs, we're not talking about that too, but to take up functions, right, on behalf of people, to free them up to do more interesting and more higher value add things and more fulfilling things. And there's a 250-year history, right, in this economy anyway, of technologies not destroying jobs at the macro level. Sure, they replace some jobs in the interim, right, when they become more widespread in usage, but over time, right, the pot gets larger and larger and more people are working. There are more people working in America today than ever in our history, right? Over 150 million people. So yeah, it's a really fascinating time and really, really a good conversation to think about how organizations can really approach their talent needs much more holistically, much more globally, and much more creatively with the help of folks like Klaus and their team at SAP and Ryan and the team at Monument. So I think it's been a great conversation.
Yeah,
Well,
me too.
I know you're trying to put a bow on this, but I just thought about one thing, Steve.
Go
that you
ahead.
have
We're
to
live. You could
do.
do anything.
We got to do it. We got to do it. This is conversation, right? But I think one of the neat things I'm seeing, so Monument, right, as an MSP, we're managing thousands of suppliers through all of our different programs around the country. And one of the trends I'm seeing from some of our better suppliers and staffing firms is just that upskilling. So we talk about the talent shortage that exists, and where clients are open to it. The client has to be open to it, but where clients are open to it, I'm seeing really neat things happening where clients our staffing firms are going into underprivileged areas and people that won't work, people want more meaningful work, but they just don't have anybody reaching out to them to help them get that opportunity. So they're doing a little bit of social type justice stuff, but they're also helping clients fill gaps. And as long as the client is open to the supplier upskilling these workers, maybe agreeing to a little longer term, for contract work or something like that, to help the supplier recoup those costs of investing in that person. I'm seeing some really neat stories that are starting to come about in the industry. So in these companies that have had a hard time filling roles, it's been taking them a year or two to fill roles because the talent's just not out there. They're now actually relying on the staffing partners to go help out a subset of the community that needs help, that wants a hand up, right? And is willing to put the work in, but just didn't have anybody helping them out in the past. So you're really helping out a population in need, and you're really helping a client fill a gap that they have in their workforce, which I think is super cool. And I think you'll see more of that as we see more use cases.
Yeah, I hope so. That's so creative too, and it really does help everyone. And I think the more that we kind of, Klaus, to circle back on your generation idea, it's just that if you were from the boomer generation, if you're from Gen X, that's just not how we were raised up to think about work. So it is a little bit of us as leaders now being more open to some of these more creative approaches, creative ideas. And overall, people really do want to do good work. No one really wakes up every day and says, I want to just skate by. It's very rare. And they want to be challenged. So I think, Ryan, to your point, if we can upskill workers that maybe they want to be more challenged, they want to have something rewarding to go do for their, in their day, it just makes sense to have programs like that. So thanks for sharing that, and keep us updated too. I mean, we want to know if there are any good stories coming out of it. We can always talk in the future about those as well. So, well, listen, thank you both for joining Steve and I. Steve, thank you for joining on the road. I know you're coming at us from New York, state of New York today, right? But listen, why don't we, before we close, Klaus, why don't you take a moment to tell people where they can reach you, how they can get more information on SAP, on Fieldglass, what you're doing, and then we'll shift Ryan over to you to give your contact information as well. So Klaus, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. And of course, there's the official website, sap.com. You can reach me via LinkedIn, Klaus Grünewald, and then SAP, or email is always working, klaus.grünewald@sap.com. So basically just like it spells, with one thing, Klaus is with C, not with K. That's the only thing. But I'm looking forward to either connect with you via LinkedIn or via email. Please, we're happy to help.
Very good.
Thank you, Klaus.
Thank you. And Ryan, what about you? Where can people find you? TikTok? Where are you?
You know what? That's so funny. I am not on TikTok.
No?
Our
Not
company made a joke about that the other day. Like, we got to get Ryan Baker a TikTok account. It was
There
a
we go.
company conference we had. But anyhow, monumentconsulting.com website, right? LinkedIn, all the social media platforms. You can find Monument. My email is ryan.baker@monumentconsulting.com. It's a long one. I wish it was just ryan.baker@mc.com, but it's not. Again, ryan.baker@monumentconsulting.com. So there's that. And then I would say Steve Salgado is a good guy to reach out to. So he's going to hate me for this one, but Steve Salgado, he's our VP of sales. So if you have any questions on how we can help, you reach out to Steve Salgado and Steve Salgado at monumentconsulting.com. So
Wonderful.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And we look forward to future discussions with you. Thank you both for taking time to take a break with us today and talk with the audience. And if you are listening live, thank you for participating today. If you're catching us on the replay, thank you for listening to the replay. You can catch us all back here next week. Thanks again.
Thank you.